Joining me now is Dr. Jay Barth, Professor Emeritus at Hendrix College, and I am also joined by Robert Coon, Managing Partner at Impact Management Group, for our post-debate analysis. Gentlemen, I'm going to start off with the question. Jay, I'll come to you first. What did we witness in the presidential debate on Tuesday night?
I mean, on a certain level, it was exactly what I imagined. I think probably a lot of Americans imagined, but it felt even more disruptive, distracting than in reality, than in imagination. It was really just a real, I guess at the end of the day, it's just kind of a shame in terms of thinking back across kind of the history of presidential campaigns, history of debates that I've seen since I was a little kid. And it was just at a level of train wreck that was just truly unimaginable. I thought at the end of the day, the leader, probably the president, because for a couple of reasons. First off, I think he was over the top with his disruptions and anger. I think also he did not move the needle on the race in any substantive way, and he is behind, and he needed to move the race. I think the other real loser was Chris Wallace. I thought he did not get any control over the debate for about an hour and 15 minutes. He got some semblance of control in the second half, but it was not, I think, what we expect out of folks who are the moderators.
And to you, Robert, kind of generally speaking, what did we witness tonight? And I'll let you go ahead and pick your losers and winners in that answer as well.
Well, I mean, we kind of watched a little bit of WWE rather than a presidential debate. We were certainly lacking, the normal decorum and substance that you would hope to see in one of those conversations, and really, the American people learning things about their candidate, or the candidates really speaking to issues that matter around the kitchen table. I mean, the constant interruptions. I think part of that's the president's nature. I think the rest of it is, I think he had a strategy that his distractions and his interruptions and constant challenges of Joe Biden was designed to try to throw Biden off, try to confuse him a little bit, get him off track. I think to some degree he was successful in that regard. But at the same time, I think I agree with Jay. It was over the top to the point that, he's being lectured by, Chris Wallace, and there's a constant effort by the moderator to kind of get him under control. I think the winners and losers, I think Joe Biden, from a big picture standpoint, there was one candidate in this debate that talked to the American living room. I think that was Joe Biden. Whether you agree with his positions or not, he was the only one talking to the public, talking to the camera, and trying to hone in on issues that people really care about. And he did it when he was interrupted. He did it, if you could tell, at pre-planned times on certain issues. But that was definitely a strategy of his, and I think that was a smart strategy. I think with independents and undecideds, I think that's going to add value to his campaign.
Well, let's hit that topic, and I want both of you to give your opinion on this. Will anyone's mind be changed? I mean, first of all, are there truly that many undecided voters that are still out there, number one? And number two, did this debate forum help anyone make their mind up? Jay?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I don't think there are that many people who are undecided. I think, sadly, in some ways, it may have discouraged a few folks from participating who are trying to find a right candidate, and probably the whole process feels worth opting out of, which is an incredibly sad thing for civic discourse and American democracy. I did think, back on Robert's point, which I thought was right on target, Biden was incredibly disciplined in both stylistically and substantively speaking to the camera and to the people on the other side of that camera. He did it again and again. It was almost came a little robotic, but I think that is kind of his nature, to kind of try to bring it back home to Scranton or to some other a place that he knows well. And I think he was just right on target with that. And he never lost that despite the chaos of the event. Even the last 30 minutes, he was still doing that, speaking to the camera. I think if anything, he probably maybe won a few votes, but I don't think they're big winners or big losers. So at the end of the day, whoever's ahead going in, Biden going into this debate.
Yeah, as you said there, whoever was leading going into this debate, since the needle didn't move much, probably stays ahead in this race. What about you, Robert? Who do you think that there's undecided voters out there that this debate could have moved one way or the other?
I think there are some, obviously, that that number is pretty small. I mean, you look at some of the national polls, and you're talking about anywhere from 2% to 7%. 7% is probably a little high at this point. I think the majority of really likely voters kind of had their mind made up, at least for the most part. I think for me, the president's approach is a little bit more of he's fighting the culture war. He's doing things that rile up his base. I think his approach is not necessarily to fight over those potential leftover voters. I think his approach is to energize his base. He's using things like radical left. He's talking about violent protests, things like that are kind of rattling the sabers. I think the difference with Joe Biden is Joe Biden's approach is targeting those people that are left undecided. And I think if you're one of those voters that is going to be persuaded by fear or the culture war or something like that, you probably already know where you are on this race. I think Joe Biden is trying to go into the living room, and really his whole message, whether it was on healthcare or COVID or even taxes, was to try to hit home with the average American. He talked about billionaires compared to the average American. He talked about how healthcare affects the average American. So he's clearly seeking them out. Now, whether or not they're persuaded, I don't know. It was really hard for probably anybody to get much of a feel with all the interruptions in that debate and just the way that it unfolded. But he's going after them. Whether or not they can be gotten, I'm not sure. But I think if there was one to get him, I think it's probably would lean to him in that debate.
I think this is a legitimate question to ask after what we saw tonight or on Tuesday night here. Should there be 2 more presidential debates? I mean, 2 more forums like this are not going to be constructive to anyone making up their mind about anything, I don't think. And it was just so disruptive, is the word we keep coming back to. I'm just not sure there's any reason to keep doing it. And I saw a lot of that reaction in social media. I mean, it may just be they put the debates on and nobody tunes in, which is a real possibility. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a real test for the moderators in the next 2 debates to take a different tact. I think that I think things would have been a little different if Wallace had just been much more aggressive, much more assertive about shutting down the interruptions early on. I think he clearly didn't want to do that because he didn't want to be perceived as taking sides in the debate, and I get that and I respect that. But it clearly went off the rails for him. I think Chris Wallace, who is just an unmitigated professional, understood that and tried to get it back on track and did to some degree. I think it's going to be a real test for these next couple of moderators, whether they can get it right with these candidates, but especially with one candidate who clearly, unless he is taught a real lesson from some post-debate polls and some other things, I don't think there's going to be a real sense he's going to change tactics at this point.
Yeah, I can tell you, as somebody who has moderated many debates before over the years, I'm not sure how I would have handled that situation, except as you got indicated to be more aggressive in the beginning. This may even be a little bit of a blueprint for potential future debate moderators to say we're putting a kill the mics section into here. Robert, what do you think? Do you think there should be another round of 2 debates here? How's this going to play out when we have 2 more of these?
I think if the format is going to play out like this, I think no, there's not a point behind it, because I don't think that the American public is going to really get much out of it. I think the smart thing for the commission to consider is whether or not they want to change the format. Do they want to kind of conduct a town hall style individual opportunity for both candidates to answer town hall questions and moderator questions on their own? I think that's probably the only way you're really going to get to any kind of substance that kind of addresses the concerns and questions that America has. So I mean, I don't think, even with the mic cutoffs, that probably cleans it up a little bit, but I still think you're going to constantly have people stepping on each other. And, I kind of sympathize with Chris Wallace too. I think it's a lot different than a primary debate where you've got, 8 candidates up there, and those folks talk over each other too, but none of them is the president of the United States. And obviously that makes kind of reining in one of the candidates even much more difficult when they're the sitting president of the United States. And that's just a, position of power. And it's very difficult to try to redress, that type of response.
All right, Robert, I'm going to let you go first on this one. Jay, I'll let you wrap it up. Was there any line or zinger or maybe moment in the debate that you think will be a defining moment for this debate? Do you think there was a maybe somebody got the best punch of the night in one way or the other? But Robert, what would you say were your highlight reel there?
There was a couple of zingers. They both had one. I think, Joe Biden had the one talking about, using the president's words about saying that coronavirus deaths, it is what it is. And he said, it is what it is because you are who you are. I thought that was a good line. I thought the president had a good line about, I've done more in 47 months than you've done in your 48 years. But apart from the zingers, I really thought the biggest kind of substantive contrast or discussion that they had really was about race. And I thought that, Joe Biden really kind of got into a conversation and tried to relate with America about the racial issues that were out there. I think you heard kind of obviously a different perspective from the president who, talked a lot more about law and order and really wouldn't kind of talk about racism as a systemic problem. I think that was something that if you're looking at those, undecided voters, maybe that's something that they look at. I don't know. I just thought that, Joe Biden really handled that issue well. I mean, I think the president then answered a couple questions well. I think he actually came out of the gate pretty well with the Supreme Court answer that he gave. But I really do think that the back and forth on race was pretty instructive.
Yeah, get curious to see how that plays out in some post debate polling, just because I'd like to see if that is an issue that moves the needle as much as the economy or COVID-19 per se. It's certainly been on the forefront a lot in some of our polling this summer. How about you, Jay? What zingers, punches, kind of, takeaways that you think might define this debate?
I don't know that there were any zingers that really stood out. I thought that Biden was particularly good on COVID. I thought the president was a little rattled on that. I thought that was where Biden kind of got his sea legs a little bit. I did think the most stunning, indeed, really pretty angering moment was the president's response regarding white supremacists and whether he would really tell groups like the Proud Boys to do it. And that was really quite amazing. And president in 2020, after our lives, in which we have, I think, on paper made a lot of progress on race, that an American president could not take that step, I thought was just really just somewhat chilling. And it's probably the most angry I've ever been in watching a presidential debate since 1976.
All right. I guess you didn't watch presidential debates before 1976, did you?
They didn't exist when we were from 1960 to 76. They didn't exist.
You were around in
I didn't exist either.
But Robert didn't exist, but Roby and I, did.
All right, Robert Coon, Jay Barth, thank you both very much. Appreciate your time after the debate tonight, and go get some sleep, guys.
Thanks.
You.